Take three.
Good evening, and it's very, very hot here in the UK, and there seems to be a plague of mosquitoes, particularly in this room. So, if we'll see how far we get.
Yeah.
So we've been playing some records. We've got a new angle. This is actually this is where John and I sit when we have a session. And then in front of us are two very large KEF 102 speakers.
Yeah, which look like
Daleks.
Daleks from Doctor Who.
Yes. So we kicked off with a fantastic Arthur Russell track, a whole side called "In the Light of the Miracle," and yeah, just a pure Arthur Russell eccentricity, a sort of dreamy disco track with all kinds of weird bits of voice and trombone and electric cello and very nice bass line, kind of very housey, but I kind of feel it was kind of way before house, so a sort of mutant disco-y kind of vibe, and a great album for anybody who doesn't know Arthur Russell. Just been reissued on Soul Jazz, The World of Arthur Russell. Pick it up.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a kind of krautrock influence in some of Arthur Russell's stuff, and I've been reading the book All Gates Open by Rob Young, which is about Cannes, which I very highly recommend. Actually, Rob Young wrote a great book about English kind of traditional music and also the influence on rock, which was called Electric Eden. Really good book.
Very good book.
And it just maybe, reading Rob's book, made me wanted to go back and have a listen to Cannes' first album, was Delay, which was from 1968, which was, in fact, the recorded before Monster Movie, but came out much later than that. And I played the track called Thief off here, which is where you can hear very strongly the Velvet Underground influence on Cannes in the early days, and also their influence on Radiohead. Which was, Radiohead covered that and actually had it in their set list for many years as well. So definitely, I mean, not the most essential Cannes record, but definitely worth getting, actually, particularly as they're, certainly in the UK, the mute vinyl pressings are very, very cheap. And that's worth getting hold of.
Very good.
Very good.
A natural follow-on from both of the last two tracks was Miles Davis's On the Corner and the track Black Satin. And again, sort of layers of interesting sonics, tablas, drones, funky drums, weird melodies, all a kind of big musical stew. And for anybody who doesn't know this album, along with Bitch's Brew, I'd say that's and also in a silent way, very essential introduction to the electric mild period.
I'm old enough to remember when that record came out, and the critics absolutely hated it. Got absolutely panned by critics, but what do they know? Moving on, kind of year or so from On the Corner to Weather Report's third or fourth album, I think, Mysterious Traveller, which was when the band, they still had Alphonso Johnson in the band, and Miroslav Vitus, although he doesn't really play very much on this record at all. And this was when Joe Zawinul really started to get control, if you like, over the synthesizers he was using and really get them to do amazing stuff. Played the track off here, which is called Nubian Sundance, and it's just an incredible piece of music, really. It's really extraordinary. I remember the first time I heard this when I lived in Scotland for a year, basically doing some building work, but also taking massive amounts of drugs, I seem to remember at the time. And we played there. We had an outdoor sound system, which was absolutely massive speakers. I remember hearing this coming across the speakers and thinking, wow, that's something else, actually. So, Weather Report's Mysterious Traveller.
Sounded great. And obviously one of the key members of Weather Report was Wayne Shorter. And this is an album called Joyrider, one of his 80s was it CBS?
CBS,
CBS albums. featuring actually a mainly female band, interestingly enough. Terry Lynn Carrington on drums, Jerry Allen on keys, and Patrice Rushen on keys, and Nathan East on the bass. Obviously has that sort of 80s production sound, but to be fair, within the first few seconds you kind of get over that, and the playing and the actual tune, Joyrider, is fantastic. Well recommended, highly recommended. And just to say, I picked this album up at a record fair a couple of weeks ago, where I had the pleasure of hanging out with Ben Costello from the VC as well. So hi Ben, and it was great to see you.
Yeah, and in fact, the last time I saw Wayne Shorter with his more recent acoustic quintet, he played Joyrider in a very different arrangement to that as well. So staying with cheesy 80s production sound, you can't get any more cheesy really than Toto. He played the track off the album Fahrenheit, which is Don't Stop Me Now, which of course features Miles Davis in a very rare kind of guest appearance. And Miles really liked Toto, well, obviously because he recorded one of their songs actually on one of his albums, the Michael Jackson song. And I mean, 80s sound, but some
Human
great
Nature.
Human Nature
Was it Toto? So?
Yeah, it was written by Toto. Yeah, and very 80s sound, but some great muted trumpet playing from Miles on this record.
Sounded good. Sounded very, very much of his oeuvre of that time.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it was mainstream appeal. Maybe was the connection of listening to this next album. We listened to She's Gone from Abandoned Luncheonette, Daryl Hall, John Oates, sort of blue-eyed Philly soul with an amazing backbeat, which we later discovered was actually Bernard Pretty Purdy. I'm sure there's lots of amazing session players on this beautiful production. Sounded great, and fantastic that this was a pop hit. Very, very soulful, extravagantly produced piece of music.
First album, I think, for them as well. Staying in the same kind of era, and I was saying to Mark, I think Chaka Khan might actually be my favourite soul singer, even more than all of the other female greats, actually. This is from her first solo album after she left Rufus, and played Love Has Fallen On Me, which is a kind of gospelish track with the usual kind of great band and some great drumming from Steve Ferroni.
And some great bass playing.
White band.
Great bass playing from Anthony Jackson.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. So you can't go wrong with Chaka. I love the woman to bits. I think she's amazing.
Yeah, and that, John did remind me, that track was originally by the Rotary Connection.
Yeah. And in fact, they stick to the Charles Stepney arrangement very much on this record. Actually.
Now, for some reason, that also really reminded me of the track Hey Now Hey, The Other Side of the Sky, which is the title album of this album, produced by Quincy Jones, featuring, of course, Aretha Franklin.
Very odd cover.
Very odd cover. It gets even more odd inside. Yeah. So, I'm sure Aretha wasn't delighted with the rather odd drawing of herself here, but what a great album. Yeah.
Good stuff. Making a first appearance at one of our sessions, I think. Lenny Kravitz. Have we had Lenny Kravitz?
Oh,
we have, yeah.
Gotta have.
Lenny Kravitz from, I think, what was his first or second album, Mama Said, and played the classic track, What Goes Around Comes Around of it. I mean, he's a bit underrated, Lenny, I think, actually. He's a very talented musician. And when he does go on the soul R&B side of things, he does it really very credibly, really. He sounds like he means it. So,
and he's got a brand new album coming out in September.
Absolutely.
Another band who really are able to kind of dip into the history of US soul music and make it sound very contemporary are Tony. And this is from the album House of Music, and we listened to the track called Loving You, which obviously features Raphael Sadiq very heavily on the vocals and some fantastic bass playing. Great album, and what a great talent he is.
ridiculously talented. Kind of almost feels like he's possibly born in the wrong decade. Actually.
Yeah.
So then, I don't know if we had a break, but we had a slight change of tack and went for Weldon Irvin. He put 3 albums out on RCA, which must have been quite a big deal at that time actually to get a contract on RCA, and played the classic track of Music is the Key, which is off the album called Sinbad. Weldon Irvin was a keyboard player, played also played later on with people like Tribe Called Quest and played with Mos Def rather and various other people in their bands. Kind of, if you like the kind of Roy Ayers kind of sound.
And Don Blackman. Who's playing and singing.
Playing and singing on that track. Very nice mid-tempo, spiritually inclined kind of funky groove. Really.
Yeah. It's actually very similar in feel for a band that I'd never heard of before. This is on the Motown label from 1980, a band called Flight, and the album is called Excursion Beyond. And I heard this on the radio a week or so ago and picked it up for really a couple of pounds on Discogs. The track to check out is called Face to Face, but a very, like if you imagine a sort of fusion between Ramp, George Duke and Roy Ayers, that's kind of what it sounds like. Great, as sampled apparently by Erykah Badu. Yeah.
Something else I really like. Then staying at the same kind of time, went for an album from Webster Lewis, a keyboard player, another keyboard player, who played quite a lot with Herbie Hancock, who actually co-produces this album. And it's called Aid for the 80s, which gives you a little bit of a kind of key of where it was. It was recorded in 1979, and played the track Give Me Some Emotion, which was a kind of bit of a hit, I think. It was kind of like a rare groove kind of hit at that kind of time. Kind of, 8 great songs, actually. Well played, good musicians, good production.
Yeah.
Solid record, really.
The chorus of that tune really reminded me of the chorus of the track If I Ever Lose This Heaven, which is written by Leon Ware, also sung by Leon Ware and Minnie Riperton on the Quincy Jones album called Body Heat. Also features some great vocal percussion from Al Jarreau, and just has an incredible cast list of players actually across the album. Actually, I think one of my favourite Quincy albums.
Me too. Yeah.
Really, really great production. Again, very cheap to pick up, and lots of great players on it.
Yeah. Then we must have had a break, I think.
We must have had a break.
We moved over to...
Just got to say, John brought the absolute classic sheep's cheese.
Yeah, it was a very good one today.
It was incredible.
Maybe we should do an advert. We should get them. We should get them to sponsor the podcast.
We should. And it's so hot, it's just completely melted flat.
Yeah, it started moving around the kitchen on its own.
Incredible
volition. Then we had a kind of change of pace, and I went for a record by a band called the Peace Orchestra, which wasn't really a band at all. Really, it was basically Peter Kruder, who was an American, who was German. Kind of, it was towards the end of the whole kind of, I guess, acid jazz kind of trip hop kind of period, really, but more interesting than that. And a lot of his stuff's just been reissued and remastered by people like Bernie Grundman and so forth. But this was an album which he did by himself, but he also worked with somebody called Dorfmeister, so it's Kruder and Dorfmeister. And kind of very kind of raw sounding, very well produced though, but very kind of sparse sounding kind of beats, really.
So really. Jazz electronica.
So this record called Peace Orchestra, which was from 1999. Well, it didn't sound like it was in 1999. It sounded much more contemporary than that.
Yeah. We listened to an album by Ill Considered. It's Ill Considered 3, available from their Bandcamp page. And thank you to Paul, the 6-inch... Is it Paul? John? The 6-inch pianist. Anyway, you know who you are. Also, I noticed James Buttery was showcasing this album quite recently. I'm still sort of discovering it. It's got a very sort of layered, ambient, sort of improvised spiritual jazz-ish kind of vibe, and features a guy called Idris Rahman on the sax. Basically a bunch of musicians that I'm not familiar with, but it's more UK jazz, and actually definitely doesn't sound, it sounds different from a lot of the other stuff that's coming through. So there you go, ill considered.
Then partly, I don't know, there was something about the sax playing actually that made me think of Henry Threadgill. And Diana, hello Diana, on one of her recent posts went on a trip to London and bought her an Air album. And I've got quite a few Air albums, so I thought it was time to get one out. And played the track called Let's Go Down to the Foot Wash from Montreux Suisse Air, which was recorded, as the title implies, live at Montreux Jazz Festival. Air were a kind of later period band out of the Chicago AACM scene, with Henry Threadgill played range of saxophones, also other instruments, Fred Hopkins, great Fred Hopkins on bass, and the wonderful Steve McCall on drums as well. And they were a band that were around for a good few years and got quite a following actually. I mean, I remember seeing them in London with the audience was large actually. There were probably 400 or 500 people there for the gig. So yeah, lots of albums by them on Arista, quite a few put out on Japanese labels, and also there's got some stuff on Black Saint as well.
Well, carrying on the thread from Diana digging in the crate on the VC, is she had a trip to London recently and was talking about the record shops she visited, and the one that seemed to really do it for her was a shop called If Music, which is in Darblay Street in Soho, a shop that I'd never even heard about, and you've got to really hunt for it because there's no sort of shop front, it's on the second floor, you've just got to look for a bell. Anyway, it's an amazing record shop, I've got to say. Really, really incredible. And I picked up a couple of albums, including this beautiful version of the Joe Farrell Moon Germs album, which was, I think, the second or third of the run of albums he did with CTI, and a very, very un-CTI-ish album. It's really quite a real sort of fusion of sort of funk, going quite out, actually, and also, you know, really, really grooving amazingly with a sensational bunch of musicians. Joe Farrell on the sax and Jack DeJohnette on the drums, Stanley Clarke on the acoustic bass, and Herbie Hancock on the keys. And we listened to the first track on side one, which is called Great Gorge. But yeah, highly recommended album. Very strong.
There's, I think I said, I think in another session before, that I think Joe Farrell's run on CTI was the strongest of anybody actually. There's also a great live kind of semi-bootleg album with Joe Farrell where he does a live version of Great Gorge on as well, with a phenomenal drum solo from Steve Gadd on it as well. From Joe Farrell went kind of to Herbie Hancock, well, stayed with Herbie Hancock really, because he's on the last record, and just played, I hadn't played Imperial Isles for quite a while, and played the track a Liloquy, I never had to pronounce it, Liloquy Valley off there. Fantastic band, kind of early Blue Note, for Herbie, 64, 65, something like that, with Freddie Hubbard, Ron Carter and Tony Williams.
Sounded great.
Sounded great.
Yeah. And from 1959, Charles Mingus, the album Ahum, the track Fables of Faubus, and absolutely beautiful piece of music, amazing arrangement, great playing, sounded great actually. John Handy, Booker Irvin, Horace Parlan. Yeah, if you don't know this, John, well, you said this was your favourite Mingus.
I think it is my favourite. Yeah, just in terms of the tunes. It's also weird hearing it in stereo, because my copy's mono, so I don't think I've ever heard it in stereo before.
Also, well, it sounded good.
Yeah.
Sounded very widescreen. It's got Better Get It In Your Soul, Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. So yeah, absolutely essential jazz album.
Definitely. And from there, went to a very strange place. And went to Henry Mancini. And I've been trying to get a hold of a vinyl copy of the album Symphonic Soul for a very long time, and I've managed to get horrible copies. So I eventually gave way and got hold of a twofer, as they used to be called, with symphonic soul, and also some of Mancini's TV themes as well, either his and also reworking other people's, and played the version of Butterfly, which has always been one of Herbie Hancock's Butterflies, with basically a Henry Mancini sound, but also kind of quite an odd kind of bass solo in the middle of it from Abe Laboriel as well. It kind of works, actually.
It's brilliant, yeah. Very, very lush string sound.
But quite odd having a bass solo in the middle of it.
Very odd, very odd. The weird thing was, John says that he's never played it to me before, but I instantly knew what it was.
You knew what it was, yeah, you must somebody. So anyway,
I knew it was Henry Mancini. You can tell it's
you
Butterfly.
did, straight away, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know how I know that.
So I'm a big Mancini fan, and this is a reissue from the UK label called Vocalion, if you can bear CDs, they do some very nice reissues of on CD material, well mastered as well.
We listened to a very nice track called Le Fleur Africaine from this album, which was a collaboration between Duke Ellington, Max Roach and Charles Mingus, called Money Jungle, which I think was recorded in about, well, I can tell you, 1962, in fact. So a very interesting moment where the old and the new guard were kind of colliding together, and there's definitely a kind of really interesting sort of tension happening between all three players. It really, I highly recommend it. Again, I'd not come across this album, but yeah, it's recently been repressed, and again, really one to seek out. Amazing music. Getting out of sync?
No, we're okay. Actually, then went for Yusef Lateef and one of his whole run of Atlantic albums produced by Joel Dawn. His album Sweet 16, which was, I think, came out in 1970, 69 or 70. Played a track called Nocturne, which features his flute playing, also a band with Joe Zawinul, second appearance of the night. Chuck Rainey, also several appearances on it as well. Yeah, it's a nice record. The one side has a experiment with a kind of symphony orchestra, which kind of works. But really, I mean, basically every Yusef Lateef album has something interesting on as well. So yeah, from Yusef, from Sweet 16.
From Sweet 16 to Buddy Miles Live, and a big shout out to Stavros, the Spinning Greek, who very, very kindly gifted, John and I, a number of albums, one of which we sort of split them up, and one of the ones I got was Buddy Miles Live. And I always have loved his studio version of Down by the River. This is an equally good and extended version, and actually an amazing energy throughout the whole of the double live album. So thank you very much, Stavros. And next session, John and I will be bringing together a selection of goodies which we will be winging its way to you at some stage in the next couple of months. Thank you.
So from a Neil Young cover to Neil Young, I went for from After the Gold Rush, Only Love Can Break Your Heart. Don't really need to tell anybody about Neil Young, I think everybody knows. But anyway, so
sounded good.
Sounded good, always does.
Nice backing vocals.
Yeah.
I think we might have had a final break, and returned with definitely one of the two worst covers of the evening. Although if you think this is bad, wait and see. This is Carla Bley lighting Steve Swallow's cigar on the album Night Glow, which again was a run of albums that she did in the 80s, which have a sort of slight smooth jazzish feel, but they're all far more interesting than that. There's great compositions, great playing, excellent kind of, just a really nice mood that they create, the musicians create, and it's, people like Steve Swallow on the bass and Larry Willis on the piano, and Hiram Bullock featured heavily on guitar, Victor Lewis on drums, and Manolo Badrena, who actually used to play with Weather Report, as I remember.
Yeah, and Miles, I think.
And Miles, yeah. So we listened to the title track called Night Glow. Yeah,
I really like those records as well. I'm very keen on. Okay, now this really is the worst cover of the evening.
It's the one.
I think I need to take it out of its cover.
So I think so. You need to go up close for this one, John.
Yeah. This could be the worst cover we've ever shown, actually. So it's only a CD, but you're going to get the full effect of it. This is Todd Rundgren. As you know, we're very big Todd Rundgren fans here. And this is from an album I've really not engaged with at all, possibly mainly because of that cover, actually, which is Todd dressed as the Easter Bunny eating a kind of egg. And it's an album called Liars, and it's got a broad theme about telling the truth and lies. But it's actually, I mean, as always with Todd, there's every song is fantastic on it as well. Just great songwriting. And played the track. This is actually the vinyl's incredibly expensive now, but this is actually a CD and a DVD combined. And played a track called Sweet, which is, as Mark said, could be a song by the soul band Maze or something. That's got that kind of sound to it. So another Todd album that I've ignored and wrongly. Really. Yeah. And it is the worst cover you've ever seen in your life.
Definitely. But yeah, I'm going to be chasing that one down now. We were just talking about songs actually, and I really like this song, which is called Ain't No New Thang, and by the Edinburgh-based band Black and Eyes, who were around very briefly in the early 90s and released a couple of EPs. And this is a track that features the singer Joyrider. And yeah, it just had that really nice kind of organic, real instrument, soulful jazz sound that was around, I guess, early 90s again. So, yeah, Black and Eyes.
And Black and Eyes kind of disappeared off the scene, and so did this guy called Ray Hayton, who was had a band. We did various things. He did a very successful remix of Temptations single, which was called
The
Joneses, which was a big hit in the UK. Also kind of did a few things on his own bat as well.
And this is Martin Giraud.
Revival. And did this, put this EP out of under the name Opaz, and the main track was I Don't Want It, which sounded okay, actually.
Yeah, he had
sounded a bit like a kind of, sounded like it's time, actually.
Yeah.
And we'll go back in the, I was saying to Mark, we'll go back in the box for another 20 years.
He had a studio round the corner from where I used to live in Hackney, where I actually did some recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Opaz.
Another one for Ben Costello, who was in my presence and looked very surprised when I bought this album at the record fair. This is the sounds of David Essex, who was a sort of 70s pop idol. I actually first encountered him when he was playing Jesus in Godspell alongside Jeremy Irons as Judas. Anyway, I mean, most of the stuff he produced was absolutely dreadful, but this album, called Rock On, the title track, it's just a fantastic tune. Produced by Jeff Wayne, featuring Herbie Flowers on the bass, also featuring Alan Hawkshaw, who appeared not so long ago on a 7-inch with Brian Bennett. Anyway, a very uncategorizable tune that doesn't sound at all rocky, but if you don't know Rock On, you should check it out.
Alan Hawkshaw did masses and masses of library music. He was one of the absolute key people for that whole thing. I'm not sure what the connection between that and this one was actually, but we started again. This is the soundtrack to The Hotspot by Jack Nietzsche, who was, of course, worked with Neil Young as well, so there's a connection with Neil Young there as well. And this is about to be reissued, I think, in some kind of incredibly lush vinyl version with presumably kind of a pair of shoes for nothing with it as well. So anyway, this was the CD version that came out a while, and it's unusual because it features Miles Davis as a kind of contributor, sideman really, along with John Lee Hooker, Taj Mahal, and a whole range of people. It sounds like a soundtrack album, but it's a very, very, it actually suits the weather. Actually, it's a very kind of moody,
hot spot,
smoky, kind of steamy record.
Yeah.
With I mean, and just hearing John Lee Hooker's voice along with Miles Davis' trumpet is pretty pleasurable in itself. Actually, as I say, I think there's a reissue of this about to come, or either just out or about to come very, very soon as well. So yeah, the film is absolutely terrible. So don't go and see the film. but the soundtrack sounded good to me.
And my final tune was from the soundtrack, another film soundtrack, a film that came out in the early 80s called Babylon, which was set, actually it was set in southeast London, set around where I now work in Deptford, but featured Brinsley Ford, who was at the time the lead singer in the band Aswad, in the main role. And this, we listened to a fantastic dubbed out version of Hey Jar Children. Really fabulous, produced by Mikey Dread, I think, and also featuring some Dennis Bovell tracks. Ooh, we're still here. Good. 30-minute mark. You've got one more. One more from John.
Burning Spear, last one. Bit of reggae, Burning Spear, off the album Dry and Heavy, which I think was his third album for Ireland Records, because he'd made a lot for Studio One before that and all kinds of other people. And played the track, I'm pretty sure it's a track called Any River off here. And it's, if you don't know Burning Spear, amazing, very distinctive voice, very kind of lush kind of backing as well, not a kind of stripped down kind of reggae sound at all. Lots of percussion, lots of keyboards, guitars and so forth. Not a million miles away from in terms of its sound palette to the kind of Bunny Wailer kind of sound, but not. This is good, but it's not as great as that Bunny Wailer album.
No, Black Art.
Yeah. So Bunny Wailer, sorry, Bunny Wailer, Burning Spear,
and on
Dry
that
and Heavy.
note,
On that note,
it's good night.
And the mosquito's back.
Is it?
No.
Okay. Thank you for commenting and subscribing.
Thank you for watching.
And tune into the All Points Radio Show if you've made it this far.
Absolutely.
I'll leave a link below. See you soon.
See you soon.